Okay. God bless everyone. Good to have you here. We continue tonight in the book of Genesis. The foundations that are there, they're so important that uh, are just wonderful to know, too. We get to see how God works and we know and understand Him better, how He deals with mankind and how He's dealt with mankind in the centuries ago, and how a lot of that comes right up to today. And we're so thankful to be able to have this word. It's such an abundant thing now. People get Bibles. It's, back in the time of Jesus Christ, there are hardly any. They had scrolls in the synagogues, and then the very wealthy could afford to have them. But now we all have them, and we're just super blessed to do that. So we're going to go into Genesis again, but I want to talk about last week, just a little recap. The setting last week and has been for the last few chapters is we're in the second year of the 7 year famine that was prophesied by Joseph. Now, when I say prophesied, he actually listened to the dreams of Pharaoh. And as you know, there are going to be the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine. The guidance was to save 20% every year during the 7 years so you would have food for the 7 years of famine. Pharaoh said, "You're the man." And he put him in charge. He became second in command of Egypt, a very powerful country in the world. And he was right there. No one was higher than him in the throne, but Pharaoh in the throne, he said. So he has this wonderful position. And he's, he was estranged from his kids, his brothers. He was 17. They sold him as a slave. And so Joseph is being going through this process of checking out his brother's character. They don't know he's Joseph, as we've talked about. They know him as the second most powerful man in Egypt. And he's doing these ruses and these little tests to see if these now are honorable men, if these are now characters, because it's been 22 years. He's 39 years old now. He was 17 when he became a slave. You can see why they couldn't recognize him. He talks different. He dresses differently. He's got on the Egyptian garb, all the royalty garb. Who is this man? They didn't know him. And so with the ruse, he actually has an interpreter. He can speak their language, but he has an interpreter to teach the Egyptian language that he was speaking to these Canaanites. And so this ruse has gone on now for quite some time, and the story continues to build. And he sets up another ruse. Last chapter was he gave them all their money back, gave them all the supplies they needed to get back home, and then he puts that silver cup in Benjamin's sack. And then he sends his steward out and caught you red-handed. And so they didn't steal it, and they put up a good defense. If we needed the money, if we needed money, why did we bring it back to you in the first place? Now you're giving it to us again, and you're thinking we're stealing a silver cup. So anyhow, they go back to Egypt, and they go right into Joseph. He seems like they get no trouble getting an audience with Joseph, and then the process begins. They offer themselves to become slaves to them because of this huge, what seemed to be problem with the stolen cup. And Judah tries to make good on his promise to his dad to bring Benjamin back. So he offers himself as a slave. And so Joseph says, no going. Yeah, I'm not going to let just one of you to be a slave here. So anyhow, they talked it through, and he passed some of Joseph's tests, and Joseph saw they were showing that themselves to be truly noble and good people each time, because he could hear them talk, and we read the records where they were talking in their language and he's listening to them. They don't know he understands what they're saying. And so the chapter ends with pleading. Judah is pleading to Joseph to to let them all go back, and that's where he's showing his love to his dad. What can I tell my dad? Um, they're going to keep Benjamin. And so this is what happens. So we continue in Foundations and Genesis series tonight in chapter 45. I'm calling this the power of forgiveness. if you'll turn to your in your whatever you're using, your Bible, uh, we're going to get into it. So let me open up, and I'm going to share my screen here. Let me see if I've got up what I want. Yep, I do. That's good. And I'll be using the REV tonight, and I use the REV commentaries, and I use a commentary by Dennis Prager, and I use a bunch of other commentaries as well as other things, other tools that I have to put these teachings together. So let me share my screen, and you can just watch along if you want to. And here we go. Click everything. No rookie mistakes. And here we go. Should be popping up, and there it is. All right, so we're in Genesis chapter 45, and we're in verse 1. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood before him, and he cried out, "Have everyone get out from me." So no one else stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. So he cleans house. Now there's probably some Egyptians outside the door that are guards and stuff like that. And so then in the next verse, he weeps aloud. He's weeps so loud the Egyptians heard, and all the way to the house of Pharaoh. Now, if the house was next door, great, or somehow they got word pretty quick to Pharaoh that Joseph is in here weeping really loud with these Canaanites, and he told us to get all out of the room. So here it is. You got Joseph now, and he's got his brothers there, and he sends them all out, and he cries out, to everyone get out. Now, in verse 3, Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father alive?" So now that the brothers have passed the test, Joseph was emotionally overcome. And we can understand that. Uh, they're there. His brothers are there. He's been incognito. They're suffering. There's pain here, and his pain from what all has happened in the past. And now he's seeing their maturity. They were not the same men they were when he was 17, who threw him in a pit and then sat down to eat a meal while he was crying out for help. So Joseph dismisses all of his attendants and reveals his identity to his brothers. His weeping is so intense, he's heard throughout the palace. It was different back then. There's not a lot of doors and stuff, so it's easy for sounds to get out. And so these Egyptians are probably really scratching their heads. They were xenophobic. They thought they were a superior race, and they considered themselves better than other nationalities. And now he's entertaining these Canaanites. So he yells out, "I am Joseph." Now, this would be kind of interesting because he just got all the servants out and all the attendants out. So that means he has no interpreter. So guess what he's speaking? He's speaking their language. Another shock. "I'm Joseph. Is my father alive?" His brothers couldn't answer him because they were dumbfounded in his presence. Now, no doubt, Joseph is speaking without an interpreter. They're dumbfounded. They're kind of in fear and in shock. Is this really happening? Could this really be Joseph, the teenager that we sold off 22 years ago? And then if they are starting to believe it, the fear is probably coming in. What's he going to do to us? Does he hate us? Are we going to be put to death? All this stuff is all coming. So they're just dumbfounded. Now, this a thing we can pull out of this and bring in today. There's a bunch of lessons throughout the Bible, and in this chapter, I'll be bringing some out. And the lesson is that we can learn from Joseph that of his emotional transparency, you know, and this can be a very powerful thing, a very tool for reconciliation, to allow yourself to be emotional, to show that you're vulnerable and you've been hurt and disturbed. And that's what he did. And it paves the way for this fractured family to resolve. So let's go ahead in verse. His brothers could not answer him. They were dumbfounded in his presence. In verse 4, Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." So they came close, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold to Egypt. Now, this is pretty interesting because Joseph acknowledges his brother's betrayal. He doesn't say it didn't happen, but he reframes it here pretty soon. We're going to see this into a larger context. Let's go ahead with the next verse here. Now, do not be grieved, which he thought they would be, nor angry. He anticipated this with yourselves that you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. So he talks quietly to them. He reframes it into a larger context. He's saying that God sent him ahead to preserve life. And that's exactly what happened. Because of Joseph and how God worked in Joseph to bring that prophecy, they had food to eat. They're 2 years into the famine. When there's a famine, no food grows. And they don't have huge storages. They can't go to the grocery store. What happens when you have a famine? People start eating what they have left and then they starve to death. So he preserved life. He anticipated that his brothers would be grieved. And the situation could have gone totally different. It could have taken a nasty, nasty, nasty turn if he decided to be unforgiving. He could have blamed them for their wrong behavior. You threw me in a pit and sold me as a slave. He could have been harsh, vindictive, and he could have punished them in any way he wanted. He had the power to do so. But instead, he made the decision. It is a decision. He made the decision to forgive. That's what he did. And sometimes that's difficult. And I imagine this would be difficult. Now, he's had a process here. He's gone through weeks, maybe a couple of months as he started this process when they first came down, then they went back, and then they came back. So we've had some time here. We know there's about 250, 300 miles. If they traveled 10 miles a day or up to 20 miles a day, it could have been 10 days or more each way. So we're talking about several weeks to make a trip there and back. So time has passed. He's probably had a lot of time to think about it. But he chooses to forgive. And that's oftentimes it's difficult. And we can't wait to feel like forgiving. We choose to forgive. And sometimes you'll forgive and you have to do it over and over again. The same for the same offense. It'll creep back up. It'll come up in waves. But yet he saw that God was working in him to preserve life. And that's exactly what he did. And God reveals this and God intervenes. But first of all, let's go to Romans 8 here. I'll flip over that really quick, a very familiar verse. Now we know that in all things God works for the good to those who love him, for those who are called ones in according with his purpose. God works for the good to those who love him. So he does things behind the scenes and he prepares, even when there might be just a minimal amount of love, he intervenes no matter what. And the Bible just has oodles of records of him intervening. I'm just going to share a few of these. We can start back in Genesis chapter 1, in verses 1 and 2. The adversary and God and all the angels have a big battle. The earth is nearly destroyed. And then as we read in that next verse, and the Spirit of God broods, he starts to come out, he looks over the situation, and that war that was started by the adversary that nearly destroyed the earth, God intervenes, and what's he do? He puts it back together. And then not long after that, man disobeys God, planting the seeds of death for mankind. God intervenes with a salvation plan. Already talking about the coming Messiah, very quick. Joseph's story here, we're just reading it now. He uses Jacob's family to continue by allowing, so it can continue to the coming Christ. So God is intervening and he gets Joseph into Egypt. So all this stuff can happen and people will survive the famine. And then we have the Exodus. The Israelites are enslaved. God intervenes and sends Moses to bring them to the promised land. Daniel in the lion's den, because of his unwavering trust, God intervenes and saves him from the lions. Esther and the Jews. Haman plots to destroy all the Jews everywhere in the entire world. And so I've got an alarm going off. I don't know why. So he was planning to destroy all the Jews, and God intervened through Esther, a young woman, and saves the Jewish race. So God is in the business of intervening, and he does here again. So let's take it up back in Genesis 45, and we'll look at verse 6. Yeah, there we go. We've read that. And then he talks about in verse 6, for these 2 years, the famine has been in the land. And there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. These men may not have known about the additional 5 years. Joseph was very aware. So they're in the first 2 years and they've got 5 years to go. So they're probably thinking, oh, whoa, this is not good. God sent me ahead to preserve you for a remnant on earth and save you alive by a great deliverance. So Joseph expands on what he just said, and he credits God with sending him there. Now we discussed this earlier that Jacob's sons were doing what men and women do. They were getting married, and we know that even Judah married a Canaanite, and they were starting to marry Canaanites. Well, the problem was that the Canaanites were pagans, and so what we're getting is God's, these people that are going to be from which the Messiah are coming from, they're getting diluted. They're becoming absorbed into the people that live in Canaan. So the sojourn to Israel was really essential for the people of Israel to become the nation of Israel. And that's what happened. And then they were called out of Egypt with the help of Moses and went into the promised land. It so happens that the Egyptians were xenophobic. So they would not marry the Canaanites because they were beneath them. So this was a perfect situation. So this helped preserve Israel as a separate holy nation until the coming of Christ. So God was able to save this remnant by Joseph and Pharaoh and the revelation and the responsibilities that Pharaoh gave him so that there would be food and people could live. And so in verse 8, so now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And God has made me a father, like a mentor, like a guide to Pharaoh. He's made me Lord of all of his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Now, this is kind of interesting because we know that Joseph is a type of Christ. So God made Joseph Lord over Egypt and made him Lord of all of his house and the ruler over Egypt. Well, God's going to make Jesus both Lord and Christ and eventually rule not only Egypt, but the whole earth. So in verse 9, let's see, I read, hurry up, hurry and go tell my father and tell him, this is what your son Joseph says. Now, that's got to be a shocking phrase to Jacob. God has made me Lord of Egypt. Come down to me. Do not wait. You will settle in the land of Goshen, and you will be near me, you, your children, and your children's children, your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. So Goshen, as I showed you, I can show you. Well, I showed you last week. Maybe I'll pull it up again here. I've got it queued up. And let me see if I can pull this up quickly for you. And I have to stop sharing. This is kind of funny how this works. I have to stop sharing for a moment, and then I need to reshare. And here it is. So here is Goshen, which is on the, here you have the Nile, the Delta, which you see where the Nile branches out and makes this very fertile delta. And then you have Goshen, which is on the east side. It's really close to Canaan, if you want to call a couple 100 miles close. And so you have them from Beersheba going back and forth here. And this route up here, as I mentioned to you, was the route that Joseph took when he was 17, when those guys bought him as a slave and then brought him into Egypt. And now we have this back and forth into Israel. This is the, get your bearings here. This is the Dead Sea down here. And so you get an idea of what kind of traveling was this backing forth stuff. And so I'm going to reshare and open up in back to that area, back into the text here. Now we're in, I think we're ready for verse 11. So the, I will provide for you there because there are still 5 years of famine. See, this is a convincing, we don't want to breeze over that. This is a convincing statement here. This is why you need to come. This is not over yet. We got 5 more years of this. So that you don't come to poverty and maybe worse, you and your household and all that you have, because Joseph was in charge of this and he had stored up and would be able to help them. So this is a wonderful argument here. And that's what he wants them to say. And in verse 12, behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that is my mouth that speaks to you. Okay, so behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, this is my mouth that speak to you. I'm telling you to do this. You must tell my father of all my glory in Egypt and of all that you have seen. You must hurry and bring my father down here. So he's got urgency in his tone. And so he's telling his brothers all that this, what he wants them to do. And then he continues here. He fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept. Benjamin is probably in his 30s. Joseph is 39. And it wasn't too long after Joseph's birth that Rachel gave birth to Benjamin and then died in childbirth. And Jacob changed his name to Benjamin. And so they were the two fully blood brothers, and they were close. And so he had been reconciled. And so he held him by the, he went to Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. They embraced. Then he kissed all of his brothers and wept on them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. So he exhibits his forgiveness again emotionally. He exhibits his forgiveness and his acceptance of his brothers. And that must have been extremely comforting to the brothers. And they were just extremely blessed to see him back. And so he shows that special affection for Benjamin. And of course they're both Rachel's their mom, but Benjamin was the only one that wasn't in cahoots with the rest of the brothers to sell him into slavery. So Joseph weeps and he is reconciling with his family. This forgiveness is very powerful and is a key figure when there's problems in a family. The forgiveness to sort out what the issues are. Sometimes with my family, I've had to ask them, and on a number of occasions, I know there's stuff I've done. I want our slate to be clean. I don't want there to be any residual resentment or bitter root growing in any of you. And I would talk to them. I've talked to them, not all the time, there was a period of time when I started realizing that I'd caused a lot of problems. And at that time, I really got on it because I wanted to make things right again. And so I would talk to them, and bless their hearts. Oh, no, Dad, you didn't ever do anything. And, they were real kind to me. And I said, well, I get it, but I have. And maybe you don't recall it right now, or maybe it's not the best time for you to talk to me, and maybe you're not ready to. But I'm here and I always will be. And so when it's something comes up that I did that you don't think I've acknowledged or asked and talked about, you come and talk to me. And boy, in the next months, and I think even years after that, they did. And that was such a wonderful privilege. It's difficult conversation, no doubt about it. It's difficult, but that's okay. You know, not all the things in life are pleasant. It's difficult owning up to stuff. And so, but what you do, you stay steady, you stay calm, and you just go through it. You get the details and you just remain positive and steady, and you acknowledge. If you can't remember, you say, help me to remember. You don't diminish their feelings in any way. Well, I don't remember that. That's the worst thing you can do, or one of them. Say, okay, tell me more about it. And even if you can't remember it, you still can say, well, I can see what I did really affected you and it hurt you. And I get it. I get why you feel that way. And then you apologize. You tell them you're sorry. And that's not what you want to do or ever do. And that you want to make it up to them, and you want to be a good man or a good friend or a good brother or a good father, whoever you're talking about. And this will go a long way in relationships. This is something that is very important. And oftentimes people, I have in-laws and relatives that are estranged with some of their families and have been for many years. And they've been talked to about it and they still refuse because it's so painful. You have to be vulnerable. And so life goes on. And one day their lives will come to an end if the Lord doesn't, tarries. And then what? So life is not that long. And so Joseph shows himself to be a wise man. And we know, but before I move off of this subject, we know sometimes reconciliation oftentimes can be accomplished, but sometimes it can't be, you know. So it's been a lot of years since Joseph was sold into slavery, and sometimes it takes a while in families. I know I've been in a situation where it took 7 years to reconcile. And it's good to remind ourselves that our lives don't last that long and we shouldn't let things go unresolved if we can. And there's a lot, I'm going to bring up some more keys on this stuff. I'm not handling the whole subject. There's a difference between forgiveness and trust. And we've talked about that. Trust has to be earned. And sometimes people are of such poor character, you don't really want to continue a relationship with them. And so that's also acceptable, especially when they don't acknowledge whatever sin they did against you. And we know that from Matthew, that when you try and you get people involved and you try to work the problem, you just move on. And God tells us not to be, we don't associate with people of good character. We don't make them our best friends and hang out with them all because their bad character will rub off. It's kind of a funny thing. Bad character rubs off a lot easier than good character does at times. So let's continue in verse 16. Oh, before I finish on that, after that, his brothers talk with him. Whoa, man, I would have loved to have heard that. Because they have got some history together. They got some owning up to do. Joseph is going to be given the opportunity to listen to them and hear them out and offer more forgiveness. They've just wept with each other. Their hearts have now been tenderized. They're open. They're so thankful for reconciliation. This must have been wonderful talks. In verse 16, the news of this was heard in the house of Pharaoh. Uh, Joseph's brothers have come, and it was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and the eyes of the servants. So Pharaoh's happy. Oh, his families have come. They're here. And let's continue verse 17. And Pharaoh says to Joseph, tell your brothers, do this, load your animals and go travel to the land of Canaan. Now, here we are, Joseph. We don't hear much, haven't heard much from Pharaoh since the interpretation of the dreams. And now Pharaoh hears that he heard about the Joseph's weeping, and then we heard that earlier. And then now Joseph's brothers are come, he gets really involved. Now, here's a lesson here, too. A lesson we can take from this is that positive relationships, the kind of relationship that Joseph had with Pharaoh, the integrity that he showed, his leadership that he's shown throughout his life with other people uh, before. And it's what we'll get is sometimes that can lead to unsuspected support. Joseph's relationship with Pharaoh benefited his entire family. So it's good that we get, the Bible tells us to get along with other people as best we can. We do the best we can to get along, and we exhibit our good character to them in love. We're told that not to hate our enemies, but to even love them, which can be very difficult. But we set that example of integrity. We don't allow others to dictate how we act. Our character must always come through. Don't let your character, the person you are, be hindered by the evil of others. So make those good relationships, and those can be wonderful. There's other places I can bring up other verses on that relate to this, but let's just keep moving here. So in verse 18, take your father and your household and come to me. This is still Pharaoh talking. He said to Joseph, well, he's telling Joseph what to tell. Take your father and your household and come to me, and I will give you the good of the land of Egypt, and you will eat the fat of the lamb. Woo. I mean, that's quite an offer, isn't it? We just heard there's going to be 5 more years of famine. And so we're going to get this great spot on the east side of the Nile. And now we're going to have plenty to eat. Now you are commanded. So Pharaoh's getting commands that he's telling Joseph, do this, take the wagons out of the land of Egypt for your little ones. You don't want them to walk 200 miles. They can't do that. And for your wives, they're going to need a ride, some of them, and bring your father. And Jacob's going to need a ride. He's not a young man anymore, and come. As far as I know, maybe he walks some of the time. Also, do not let your eye look with regret about the belongings. Don't worry about what you're leaving behind. Don't worry about that, because you've got stuff down here for all the good of the land of Egypt. It is yours. Wow, what an offer. Such kindness, such goodness. What a relationship Joseph and Pharaoh had. And still, we can draw from this type of Pharaoh being the type of God and Joseph being the type of Jesus, that closeness, that relationship, how they work together and still do. The sons of Israel did so. Here we switched to Jacob's name that he was given. He was named Israel. The sons of Israel, the sons of Jacob, did so. Joseph gave them wagons according to the commandments of Pharaoh and gave them provisions for the way. He gave each one of them changes of clothing, but this is coming. But to Benjamin, he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of clothing. So Joseph is giving Benjamin special treatment again. And we can understand his preference. He was the full brother. And we can guess how the other brothers felt about it, his favoritism. It was kind of difficult when Jacob showed favoritism to Joseph that caused so much evil that it most likely led to him being sold as a slave. But now we have the brother having favoritism to his brother. And so under the circumstances, with all this forgiveness going around and reconciliation, I think they probably understood. In verse 23, he sent them the following. to his father 10 donkeys loaded with good things of Egypt, 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and food for his father on the way. So he sent his brothers on their way. As they departed, he said to them, do not quarrel on the way. What a wise stage, what a wise thing to say. Think about that. Now, we got forgiveness can bring restoration. And this wisdom that Joseph is telling his brothers as they depart, not to quarrel along the way, because they're still vulnerable. They're still vulnerable to damage, and they could really get into a real twit on their way home. You can see why the brothers could have argued about, well, whose idea was it to sell Joseph? And they start pointing their fingers. We should have never done that. You can just imagine how brothers are going to talk to each other when they're out, all these 10 or 20 days getting back to Beersheba. And what are they going to tell Jacob? They've lied to him for 22 years. Oh, it was your idea to lie to him. No, it wasn't. It was yours. You can just see this. So, anyhow, Joseph said, don't quarrel on your way back. Don't quarrel. So he sent his brothers away and he said, do not quarrel. In verse 25, they went up out of Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to Jacob, their father. And they told him, saying, Joseph is still alive, and he is ruler over all the land of Egypt. Wow. His heart went numb because he did not believe them. So Jacob's feeling are difficult to express here. He probably felt shocked. How would you feel? Your son that you're led to believe was killed by a wild animal is now alive and has been for these last 22 years. And it kind of looked like Jacob hadn't lost hope because he said that he was away from him. He didn't ever say he was dead. And that's pretty common of parents. They always hold on. It was a lot to take in. Then he could have been overjoyed with Joseph that he was alive. Probably was. It probably went back and forth. Why did you lie to me? Who knows? But he just went numb and didn't believe them. But you can bet there was a lot of conversations that went on between the family members. So, it's not all recorded what happened, but it goes on that they told him, and I'm going to get into that. Well, let me go ahead and read it now. And then they told him all the words of Joseph that he had said to them. And when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob, their father, came alive. Doesn't mean Holy Spirit or Spirit upon you. It was just his attitude, his being. He was now, oh, my son's alive. What a blessing to hear after you've grieved so many years. And so these conversations probably went on behind the scenes. And, one of the best things I know to do when you're wrong, like the brothers, their dad's going to say, why did you lie to me for 22 years? Well, you admit it. You say, yeah, I did. You admit you're wrong. You can say, you can tell them my tent. I didn't want to hurt you, you know, but I did. I did lie to you. We did a bad thing and we wanted to cover it up. We were jealous of Joseph because you loved him so much. You loved him so much. We didn't love him. We were jealous. We shouldn't have been jealous, but we were anyhow. You can't blame Jacob for their jealousy. So they had to own it all up. And I have no excuse. Um, and I never ever want to do that to you again, Dad. And this is a great example. It's how a dad can handle their son. If we look at the prodigal son, who was given all of this inheritance, he went off and squandered it with riotous living. And what did he do when he came back? Well, the father was looking for a long time, hadn't given up on his son, as most fathers don't, waiting for him to come back. And when he showed up, the father ran to him. And when he gets to his son, he says, one of the first things he says is, I have sinned. He owns up right away. He didn't deny it. He didn't make excuses. He didn't lay blame. He, he did consider himself unworthy. And this is not easy to do. I've resisted it. I'll tell you, be quite honest with you. I've resisted it plenty. When I knew I was wrong, I didn't want to own up to it. And what did that do? It caused more damage. Oh, gosh. It takes sometimes so long to learn this stuff. It just caused more damage because when you deny what you did, the hurt remains. And then it feeds the bitter root to grow. And it can absolutely wreck relationships. So it's very uncomfortable to admit you're wrong. So I had to do it. As a matter of fact, I had to do it again today to one of my sons. Uh, he was upset with me. And, you know, he told me why he was upset. And, well, first of all, I made some accusations and I'm saying, why are you saying that? And then after a day passed, he told me what it was. And so I thanked him for his honesty and I validated his feelings. And I said, I understand you're upset. And I told him what my intentions were. And I was kind to him. And I let him know that I validated his feelings and that I was sorry for what I did. I would never intentionally make you feel that way. And so I'm waiting for his response. So we'll see. But, you know, I can do, and if he responds poorly, I'll keep at him. I'll keep at him. I'll keep at him until it's resolved. I've done everything I can to resolve it. And we've been through these ups and downs in our life. So I'm confident that he will, because both of us are forgiving people. And once we forgive, we forgive. So, you know, my fear was if I owned up to being wrong, I would be rejected. You know, I'd no longer be loved. I would be discarded, of no value. I had that fear for a long time. And so it made it very difficult for me. And maybe you have had similar stuff like this too in your lives. You know, I just can't do it. My life was based on performance. And so I learned that I could be very flawed. And what I learned that when I was afraid of being discarded or rejected, actually the opposite occurred. I was more accepted and more loved. And I thought, wow, I should have done this a long time ago. So we all need love and we're all flawed. And these things come up in life and we just can't let them go. So we continue. Joseph is asking them to unroot themselves, the whole clan, and travel to a country most of them have never seen, 100 miles away. But he's already told them that there's going to be 5 more years of famine. And here they are. He's got family. We got family in Egypt. And matter of fact, he's second in command. So an exciting, in some ways, it's scary and exciting at the same time that they're being asked. But Joseph has sent all this stuff, and Jacob is now happy. He's revived now that his son is alive. And then finally, Israel says, "I'm convinced." Uh, some translations say enough, but enough could mean something positive and it can mean something negative. But my understanding that the translation here is better translated, at least on some of the translations, and I believe it. He's saying, I'm convinced Joseph, my son, is still alive. You've proven it to me. I've seen all this evidence. I will go and see him before I die. And so that's how this chapter ends. And I want to just kind of talk a little bit further about some of the stuff. And, you know, let's review the people. You know, Joseph demonstrates emotional maturity as we recap this. He reframes past wrongs. He is a proactive leader. His, his actions teach the value of forgiveness and the importance of focusing on present responsibilities rather than past grievances. Now, the brothers, let's talk about them for a while. They find their initial they find their initial betrayal is met with unexpected grace. Now, their sincere repentance laid the groundwork for this and for the possibility of redemption, which happened. And I know you can forgive people whether they should, you can do it anyhow, no matter what. Jesus did it to the soldiers that were in part of his crucifixion. Now, let's talk about Pharaoh. Pharaoh's support illustrates how relationships and respect can extend benefits beyond what you might imagine. And let's take a look at Joseph. Jacob. Jacob is transformed from despair to joy upon receiving evidence of his Joseph's survival and status. So we can see that the human need for reassurance and the impact of restored relationships can have on a person. So, just some final closing thoughts on this forgiveness that I mentioned I wanted to bring up. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It allows us to let go of the past so it doesn't keep hurting us. It doesn't say what happened was okay. It doesn't mean you now have to trust the person who hurt you. Not all relationships can be restored, nor should all relationships be restored because of different character issues. Sometimes it can be best just to forgive and move on. Joseph's choice to forgive changed and restored his family and saved a nation. It had a profound effect. Forgiveness is powerful. It's a very powerful thing. It's a very powerful gift to give to someone and a very powerful gift to receive. And one of the things, the great things, the beautiful things, not one of, but God showed us he gave his only begotten son because of his love. And that only begotten son became an absolute tool for which God forgive us and all of mankind. So, Heavenly Father, thank you for this evening. Thank you for the word. Thank you for your love for us, your goodness for us, and how you have taken the time and moved Moses, it seemed like, to write and to record this record in such detail. We've been on this for several chapters now, and there's more to come of how you took care of people and how we see the foundations of the nation of Israel, how you protected them in Egypt during the famines. Thank you for how you show your love, how you fight for your people. You get involved. You're not passive. Thank you that you still do that today in our lives as individuals. So thank you for your blessing on this group tonight, for a wonderful night's rest. Each of us needs sleep, and we've already prayed for Matt's sleep. He hasn't been getting sleep. We pray for him. And just thank you for all the stuff we've lifted to you and for all your goodness that you showed to us. Bless us this night in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.